Okay. Thanks for coming, everyone. You guys been enjoying the conference so far? I think it's probably been a bit of an overload in terms of technical content for 3 days. So nothing like easing into a talk that doesn't have anything to do with code, no C#, no JavaScript, nothing. So in a way, you can relax a little bit over here in this talk. Before I get started, quick show of hands. Are there any non-developers in this room? All right. I was going to say, if you are a non-developer, then if you're not a developer, I was going to ask you to leave the room because, as you can clearly see, it's a soft skills for developer talk. But I don't have to do that anyway. But jokes aside, whether it's soft skill is soft skill, whether you're a developer or non-developer, I think you're all going to find this relevant over here. So the question, my name is Mahesh Krishnan. I work for Telstra Health as a CTO, but I started my career as a developer like anyone else and rose up the ranks. I think I do have a bit of a unique perspective on what it takes to develop soft skills, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So what are soft skills? To actually explain what soft skill is, I want to start with a bit of a story. When I started my career many years ago, I went into work, and there was this developer that worked with me, really brilliant guy. Those days we used to code in C++, and I looked at the code, and it was very good. I looked at it and I thought this guy was my role model. This is exactly how I need to start writing code and everything else. And then I go away for a few days, and then I come back, and this guy is gone. He'd lost his job, he was made redundant. Effectively, he was fired, right? However you put it, he was gone. And so being a young developer, I was a little apprehensive. I just, took my time and then eventually took up the courage to go ask one of our senior colleagues what had happened. And I told him, I argued, this guy was really brilliant. I mean, technically, he was very strong. What happened? I mean, there were so many other people in the company who weren't half as good as this guy, but why did we end up laying off this guy? And there's something that the senior person actually told me, and he said, well, there are skills other than your technical skills that really matter at work. And I went like, what do you mean? I mean, you're fresh out of university, and you think that you get good grades, and you're really good at your coding skill. Effectively, that's all you need, right, to succeed in your job. As it turns out, that itself was not enough. And so began my journey trying to figure out what are the skills that you need to actually get better at your work. And so that's what this talk is all about. I mean, there are certain skills that I look for when I hire people. There are things like how you portray confidence. How are your communication and interpersonal skills? There are things like how you go about managing time, how you go about setting your goals, and how do you go about managing the tasks that are given to you. How do you deal with problems? How do you deal with conflict? What about leadership skills? So these are some of the things that people look for in a job. And if you're finding, if you want to progress in your career, these are the things that you need to focus on. So let's get started looking at confidence itself. Now, I spent many years as a consultant. And one of the key things about being a consultant is that as you step into the customer's office, straight away you're expected to know all the answers. And you're supposed to portray that confidence that they expect out of you. You go in, you shake the hands, and you may not know all the answers, but the customer actually thinks that you know all the answers. You don't have a lot of time to basically prove yourself and then say, hey, trust me, this is the right way of doing it. Straight away, your body language needs to show that you're in control. And that's where this concept of nonverbals comes through. Now, there is a famous American psychologist. Her name is Amy Cuddy. And if you go look at TED Talks, and you'll find a video of her, and she talks about confidence and everything else. And I highly recommend looking at it. And she's done a lot of research on nonverbals. Now, you look at world leaders, people, world leaders, heads of companies, CEOs, managing directors, and things like that, a lot of them naturally exhibit this quality. Even before they open their mouth and say a single word, people think they know what they're saying, what they're going to be doing. It's all in the body language. These are the things that they actually talk about as nonverbals. Even before you open your mouth, people think and trust these people. So how does it happen? Like, how do people, even before they open their mouth, how is it that they actually portray confidence? It's like I said, in body language, people take different postures. When you're really confident, you put your hand up on your hip, and you've got your hand folded, and you suddenly look like you know what you're doing, and that's really important. And it turns out a lot of politicians naturally have this kind of quality. And they did a lot of research, and they found it's all on those hormones. Effectively, world leaders and so on, they have two kinds of hormones. I mean, like, everybody has this, but what happens is there's the adrenaline and the cortisol. The cortisol is known as a stress hormone. What happens is, under pressure and stress, they have lower levels of cortisol that are being produced in their body. At the same time, they have higher levels of adrenaline that actually gets generated in the body. And so this is your bodily, because of these hormones, suddenly you exhibit these qualities of confidence. So what she argues, she's done a lot of research, and one of the things she argues about is like, hey, when you are confident, your body language, basically your body exhibits those qualities. Now, what if the reverse can actually be done? What if you kind of, fake it? You basically come in and you take a more dominant posture of your body. Would it actually have an effect on your on your mind and how the hormones actually gets produced? So they did research, of course, right? So they basically called a whole bunch of people, and then they asked them to take what is known as power poses. Right? Now you look at the top, these are all the power poses. You come in, you got your hands on your hips, and you seem to be you're in control, right? This basically exhibits qualities of being in control of the situation. And this is the opposite of a low power pose. Here you effectively expand your body and make yourself appear big or whatever it is. And here you contract and you shrink down your body, and it feels like you are not in control of the situation itself. Now, during her research, she had people take up that posture, the high power pose, and then the low power pose. What she actually found was that, and they measured, so they effectively called these people in, asked them to spit on a test tube, and then they measured their hormone levels. And guess what? People who actually took these things, they had lower levels of cortisol and higher levels of adrenaline in their body, as opposed to the people who took low power poses, and they had the exact opposite result. In fact, what I want you to do is I want you to humor me. I know it's late in the day, but why don't you guys get up and spend 30 seconds taking up one of these high power poses. All right? Come on, get up. 30 seconds, all right? I'm not going to keep you here for longer. You all don't have to look like Wonder Woman or Superman,
You're going to get a beating at the end.
All right, that's enough. All right, you guys can sit down now. Now, what this actually does is it actually increases the adrenaline in your body, and it does lower your cortisol level as well. Now, imagine this thing, right? So you go into an interview, and I'm not going to ask you to go and sit like that in an interview. But before you go into the interview, right, you could just go into the bathroom, maybe take a high-power pose for about 3 minutes, and suddenly you go walk into the interview, and suddenly you've got a spring in your step, you've got a firmer handshake, and suddenly the person who's actually doing this interview is basically saying, well, here's a really confident person. He must be knowing what he's actually talking about. So you effectively kind of like fake the confidence, right? But it's okay, right? You start thinking, well, I've kind of like faked it once, and I've got this job now. I mean, what am I going to do? Like, I'm still not under control. And this is what is profound, right? If you continue to keep faking it, you can actually make it. Let's assume that you actually do this every day. You kind of like go in and you take your high power poses and things like that, and suddenly you get a little bit more confident. And that is profound. So key takeaways for this is, of course, you can actually improve your confidence by improving your posture itself. And of course, you can fake it till you make it. And the third thing is to get over that imposter syndrome. A lot of people have this imposter syndrome where you've done your you've probably done really well at school. You've really done well at university. You know what your stuff. You get into work, and suddenly you've got this confusion. And it's like, hey, maybe I'm not good enough. I'm surrounded by these really, really smart people, and I'm not sure of myself. And I'm really an imposter, and I'm going to be found out anytime. I'm going to be sacked. Right? People do have that kind of feeling. In fact, I have this feeling, right? I come in and stand here in front of you, and I speak, and I think, hey, maybe I'm just a fake over here. I'm not good enough. I'll look at some of the other speakers and say, I'm just an imposter, and I'm going to be found out, kind of thing, at any point in time. But you need to get over that feeling. You wouldn't have been in that position unless you're good, and that's the thing that you need to keep telling yourself. And confidence builds over a period of time. You need to keep working on it. The second soft skill that a lot of people look for is communication. Now, we as developers are pretty poor at communication. And we love chatting with people on an email. We'd love to do that on Slack or in any other IM. But when it comes to one-on-one conversation, sometimes we're just not good enough. And we need to constantly keep working on it. The thing that I'll actually talk about is first lesson of communication is to listen. Effectively become an engaged listener. So when you go into a meeting, it doesn't have to be a one-on-one meeting, like whether it's a one-on-one meeting or whether it's like a meeting with lots of people, one of the key things that you need to do is to pay attention to what the other person is saying. When I'm saying pay attention, look at the person, make the eye contact. How many times do you go into a meeting room with our laptops on or our mobile phones, and then the other person is talking and you're going, on your phones, or you're tapping away on your keyboard? You're not making that eye contact. We're talking about these non-verbals. You're not recognizing any of those things because you're focused on something else. And I think that's a really good thing to do. It's like shut off your laptop or your phones, put it down, or tell the person, hey, I'm taking notes. You listen to what the person is saying, and then you tap away on your keyboard. But try and pay attention to what this person is saying. Avoid interrupting while other people are talking. And this is, I find this all the time where you don't give other people enough airtime. You interrupt them, you judge them midway through the conversation. They haven't completed what they've said, and then you suddenly interrupted them, and I know what you're saying. We should be doing this. I'm like, hang on a second, I haven't completed what I was trying to say. Just hold back, just that extra minute, so that the other person can finish what they're trying to say. I think that's really, really important. So first, we need to stop jumping into conclusion. And the other thing that we do when we interrupt other people is to hijack the conversation. I mean, developers, we do it all the time. We are there sitting in a room and we're talking about a really important production issue that's popped up, and we're trying to troubleshoot it. And suddenly we said, hey, you know what? The problem with this is logging, and we need to be thinking about what logging framework we're going to be using in the next project. Now, that's effectively hijacking the project. It's kind of relevant, but it's not. We're trying to fix a production issue over here. You got to, it's also a good idea to provide feedback. A simple nod of the head sometimes does wonders, right? You can also listen to what the person is saying, and sometimes they have a really long conversation. They've said a lot of things. You could basically summarize what they've said, paraphrase what they've said, just repeat what they've said, so that everybody in the room and yourself have actually understood what they've said. That goes a long way. Of course, it's not enough to listen. You've got to talk back and clearly articulate what you actually said. A lot of developers, we have this habit of rambling on for a long time on some, you start on some topic, and then you keep rambling on it, not trying to make any sense like I'm doing now, I suppose, a little bit of rambling. You've got to be concise on what you're saying. Keep it short and keep it simple. The second thing is you got to tailor your message to the audience. You go into a room and you have a CEO sitting over there, or someone from marketing, and then you can go on talking about dependency injection, or Kafka, or you throw all kinds of buzzwords into the conversation, and like, who are you trying to impress? You've lost them completely, and they're not impressed at all. So try and figure out what the target audience is, and say accordingly. The other thing that I find with developers particularly is they sometimes tend to be very condescending to the people that they're talking to, particularly when they're non-technical. They basically say, let me try and explain this to you so you can understand. Cut all that stuff out. Now, it's really important, even when you're talking to give the right pauses at the right place, control the tone of your voice. You give pauses at the right time so you get people a chance to ask questions and things like that. I've been in meetings where people continuously talk without stopping, just in case someone else gets a word in, right? That's something that we need to avoid. But a lot of communication that we do these days is via email. And we talk about email etiquette all the time, and I find that we still need to keep repeating these messages over and over again. So I've listed a bunch of things as far as email etiquette goes. The same message that I said when you're talking and conveying a message, right? You got to try and be concise and keep it short. Sometimes we put in a lot of stuff in our emails, right? 2-3 page emails. Like, I get lots and lots of emails. And sometimes when I see an email that runs to 3 or 4 pages, I kind of like lose interest. The first paragraph is effectively what I go through, and then I quickly browse through and see what's in the end, and that's about it. So what purpose does it say? A simple TLDR, too long, didn't read, and this is the summary of it at the very top, does wonders to me. And I look at it and go like, okay, I know what it is, and then I can move on. If you want something action, if you want someone to take action out of the email, send it to just one person. An extension of this, right, is if you don't want any work done, send it to 2 people. The 2 people are going to look at this and say, oh, well, I think the other person is going to action this thing. I'll just keep quiet. Happens all the time. So if you want something done, just send it to one person. But of course, it's important, you can CC somebody important in it so that they know that this person is looking at it, or, my boss is looking at it, maybe I should get this thing done. But apart from it, just send it to one person. Be careful with your reply alls as well when you're sending a reply. We do it all the time. We hit a reply all, and we talk about things that we shouldn't be saying, even about people who are in the mail list as well. So be very careful about that. Couple of other things. The tone of the email is very, very important. It gets lost in translation sometimes, and that's why things like emoticons, like smiley faces and that help. But I hate emails where they put in like 6 or 7 smiley faces right next to each other. That just drives me nuts. Remember, right? It's okay to be, express a little bit of emotion on it, but it's not a text message, right? It's a very formal way of communicating with your colleagues. Just keep that in mind. And 2 other things: never say anything that you wouldn't say face to face. This is really important. Also, don't send an email when you're upset or angry. Sometimes when a conversation goes on for too long, or someone appears in the email to be angry, just pick up the phone and talk to them. It's a much easier conversation, and you can resolve differences rather than going over this over and over again. Cool. The next thing I want to talk about in terms of soft skill is time management. Even within time management, I've got 4 things to discuss. One is how you go about planning things. I want to talk about how to say no, because that's really important. We have this habit of taking more and more work, and we need to know when to say no. I want to talk a little bit about delegation of work, and then I also want to talk about how we stay focused. So let's start with planning itself. Now, I think that everything that you need, everything you do needs to be planned, no matter how small the task is. Even if you're going into a meeting, it makes really good sense to maybe write 3 bullet points. I'm not asking for people to prepare a Gantt chart and with everything on it, right? Just bullet points is good enough. You just need to have a bit of a direction on what you want to then, direction on how you want to get it done or what you want to do. It's okay to change a plan, but to start with, you just do need to have a plan, and that's the key thing. And it's good to plan over a long period of time. You could actually set yourself plans for a year, effectively goals. And if you're doing goals, you've got to use the SMART acronym to your advantage. Little things like, if you're setting a goal, you've got to be specific. It's got to be measurable. You may say something like, oh, I want to learn Angular 2 this year. That could be your goal. And you say, well, it's very specific in this case. How do you measure it? How do you know that you've actually done a good job of learning it? So when I work with my own team, I basically tell them, you know what, I want you to go do a presentation in a user group or a meetup. Just do 2 this year on the topic that you actually learned. It kind of like gives you an indication on how well you've learned. Maybe public presenting is not the thing for this person. Talk about maybe writing a blog post or something. It could be an internal brown bag within the company. It doesn't have to be a user group. Or a little pet project. Something that you can actually measure it by. Again, it's got to be attainable. You don't set yourself some goal that you're not going to reach. It's okay to have a little bit of stretch goals, but it's got to be attainable. It's also got to be relevant and time bound as well. So you set yourself 6 months, 5 months, or whatever. So once you set these goals, goals for a year is okay, but I think when you're doing your day-to-day work, it's good to plan for a week. I set things that I want to do for a week. I just write it in a piece of paper. And it just sits right in front of my desk, and as I go through them, I actually physically scratch them out. Of course, I don't get through all of them during the week. And so it gets carried over for the week, and that's perfectly okay. Same thing is plan for a day, plan for a week, and so on. It's important to set up checkpoints and milestones to track progress. You set yourself a goal, as I'm going to learn Angular as an example in 3 months' time, and it'll be good to have a checkpoint at every 3 weeks to see how far you've gone or not gone, so that you can take some corrective actions. I think that's really important. Last but not the least, don't procrastinate. So if you think about doing something, just go ahead and do it. So certain tips and techniques. First thing I want to talk about is using Kanban boards. Developers, we kind of like get it. You plan things and you move it from, I suppose, one swim lane to another. Things that you want to be done, things that are in progress, and once you've done it, you can actually move it to the getting done board. There are plenty of tools available, apps that are available that you can actually download to help you manage your tasks, to-do lists, and boards. One of the really good examples is Trello. How many of you use Trello here? A few people? Yeah? So Trello is really good because you can set up your swim lanes. You can basically say, it can be anything. This example that I actually picked up from the Trello webpage is around redesigning a kitchen, and they're tracking everything on it. But you can actually go ahead and say, you can create your own Trello, and you can say, what are the tasks that you want to manage, and start putting things on it. There's this methodology called Getting Things Done by David Allen. And if you haven't seen it, it's a really good source. It's a model that it's a methodology that he actually uses. He calls it GTD method. And it's all about how to get things done, right? So it talks about how you capture the information. And once you capture the information, you start filtering it. You kind of like seek clarification. There are certain things that you don't want to do. You chuck it in the bin. And then if something needs to be done straight away, you do it. Or you start planning it, start organizing it, and so on and so forth. And you can use that. The key thing is to prioritize everything as well. So how do you prioritize? Stephen Covey's got this wonderful quadrant, and this was written many, many years ago, and it's still relevant to us. It's all about splitting your tasks into important and urgent, and important and non-urgent, and similarly, not important but urgent, and not important and not urgent. Obviously, you look at it and go, well, that's the one that you probably is the least important to you. And you try and limit as much as that. And you try and manage this as well. Like, if everything is important and urgent, that's not a good thing either. So it's a good way of prioritizing your task and getting things done. Now, one thing that I want to point out at this point in time is that there is no one-size-fits-all. There are plenty of tools, tips, and techniques that you can actually use. But there's no one-size-fits-all, and it's up to you on which technique that you want to use. I personally like writing some of these things down in a piece of paper. I use Trello as well, and I write this down. And the physical act of scratching things out also gives me a sense of accomplishment that I've actually gone through and done these tasks. Learn to say no. How many of you find it hard to say no when someone actually asks? Quite a few people, right? I still find it hard. I mean, why? I mean, like, your boss may come over and say, hey, get this done. And how can you say no to your boss, right? So you pick on this additional task. Sometimes you want to do it just because you like doing this stuff. It's like, hey, I love doing this stuff. I love firing up WinDebug and doing this stuff. Just let me know. I just want to do it. And or sometimes, a teammate comes over and says, hey, can you help with it? And you feel sorry for this person. And you say, oh, okay, you know what? I'll spend some time with you and try and help you out. But what happens is that sometimes it can affect your own work. So how do you actually figure out whether to pick up the task or not? So the qualifiers I have are basically that, right? So first thing is when something pops up, someone comes and asks you to get something done, you think about, is it part of your team's activity or goal? If it is, then it's great. So you actually pick up and start doing it. You can add it to your list of things. You go ahead and prioritize that based on the list that I was talking about earlier and get it done. And then you talk about, well, can someone else do it? Maybe there are people who are better equipped to perform this task, and maybe they can actually do it. At the same time, well, do we have the time to do it? And that's another important qualification. You just cannot keep taking on more and more stuff and then not do a good job of it. But then here's the question: how do you say no? Well, you got to turn down the work politely and not seem like you'd still like to be seen as a team player, right? So how do you say politely? You can phrase a sentence saying like, I would love to help, but I'm working on tasks, so and so. Is it okay to get this done next Monday? And sometimes they may say, hey, next week is too late. No, it's okay. I'll go find someone else. You can also say, say, hey, this task will take about a full day to do. I don't have a day. Why don't I quickly give you a 15-minute introduction on how to get it done? And maybe you can get it done yourself, or I can, maybe find someone to do it. That's another way of deferring the task or helping someone do it. Well, what if your boss comes over and says, can you get this done? How are you going to handle that? You can be honest with your boss and say, hey, boss, I've got X, Y, and Z. Can you help me reprioritize these tasks? And then he may say, well, you already got X, Y, and Z. You know what? I'll go find someone else. Or if it's really important, he or she is going to help you prioritize that. And so it's a win-win situation for everyone. Staying focused. This can be really hard for a lot of people. The first thing that you need to do is to shut down your distractions. Be staying focused. These days, we've got everything. We've got our Twitter running. We've got Facebook. We've got LinkedIn. And then I have my phone. When I turn on WhatsApp notifications on, it just goes crazy because there's all these people. I have like friends and family in India, and it seems like they have nothing else to do than post these messages on WhatsApp. So anyway, turn off all these things off when you're trying to get into a bit of when you start doing a bit of productive work. Get headphones; they're really good. Even whether you're listening to music or not, you put them on, and then people don't bother you as much. Yeah, they're great. There's always the tendency when you're about to start work and you've got your mouse and you go in and you go, maybe I should go get myself some water or coffee or some snack. I just need to raid the kitchen. Get everything on in your desk before you start work so you make no excuses to get up and go, all right? Set your phone on silent as well, just before you're beginning to do a large piece of work. Set your phone to silent. You turned off your email. You set yourself busy on your chat and everything else, and now is the right time to do your work. Okay, so how do you do it? So have you guys heard of the Pomodoro technique? Anyone here? Pomodoro? Yeah, a few people. Now the Pomodoro technique is a really good one. So it's based on the tomato timer that you may have seen in kitchens, right? So what you do is you twist it around, and you set your time to about 25 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is, and then it goes off when the timer finishes. So in the Pomodoro technique, you split out all the tasks that you want to get done, and then within a Pomodoro, which is effectively 25 minutes, without any distractions, You basically go through and get all the work that you plan to get it done without any distractions. And because you actually set yourself this block of 25 minutes, it's targeted focus time on the task that you want to get done. And once you do that, you have this physical, you've got the list and you tick them off, and it gives you a sense of satisfaction that you've actually gone through and done a lot of these things. And that's really effective, and it gives you a sense of satisfaction. After 25 minutes, the Pomodoro technique, the recommendation is you take a 5-minute break, and then you go check your email, spam your friends, whatever you do all those kind of things. After every 4 Pomodoros, they suggest that you take a much longer break. Maybe it's like an hour, go take a break, do whatever you want. And that keeps you fresh as well, because you've taken that bit of a break. Decluttering your mind is really important. Getting enough sleep and rest. How many of you think that you get enough sleep? Right? Not a single, oh, well, one hand has gone up. Well done, sir. I always have this problem. I know I need to get more sleep, but I end up working late or doing something. And you know, one thing that's actually helped me is this device that I wear on my hand. I actually got this device, I turned it on, and it started recording my sleep patterns and things like that. And within the first week, I had such shocking results that I knew I had to do something about it. Just going an hour early to sleep, I think made a big difference after that. Maybe we should just all try and get that extra hour of sleep, or extra 2 hours of sleep, or maybe even more than that. Sleeping hours is really important. Just going for that walk, short walks, long walks, whatever it may be. I like to go for runs, but you know, it depends on the person, whatever works for you. Maybe you want to do a little bit of yoga or go to the gym, whatever. It helps you relax your mind. We talk about decluttering your mind. Just decluttering your physical environment does wonders. Just take away everything else, keep a nice clean bench, desk I should say, and then work off it. That does wonders. Above all, one of the key things that I want to point out is just have fun, you know, take breaks, you go on holidays and things like that. It just helps you keep fresh in your workplace. I think that's really, really important. One last thing about doing things effectively is around not doing multitasking. How many people actually think multitasking is really good? Well, it's one person. Multitasking is really good if you're a computer, right? As humans, we are really bad at it, whether we acknowledge it or not. Let me just play Pokemon Go while I'm driving, and I'm not sure where I'm going as well right now. That's no good. Delegation. Delegation is all about letting someone else do the work for you. First thing is, because you know you don't have all the time to finish stuff. So what better than to actually get someone else to help to do it? But we all have this trouble of doing it. You know, first thing is we need to trust the person that we are delegating to, and that's sometimes hard to come by. And so that's the first thing that we need to learn to do, is to trust your colleagues and people you work with. So when you're delegating, one of the key things is you define the task that you want to do and the level of delegation. So you give someone a task and say, hey, what if there's a problem with it? Are you going to tell this person I'm giving you full delegation authority to go do it yourself, come whatever it is, all I want is to get the task done? Or are you going to tell them, come back to me and I'll make the decision for you? It's okay either way, but you need to make sure you communicate it clearly how you want to get it done. Of course, you need to make sure that whoever you're delegating to has enough sufficient skills to do it. You don't want to set them up for failure. Can you please write this piece of code in React.js? And I have no idea what React.js is even. It's not going to work, right? Communicate what when you're delegating, you communicate what, why, and when. What are the things that needs to be done? Why does it need to be done? And what's the deadline? 3 really important things. You don't necessarily need to tell them how to get it done. It's a little simple case, right? It's like my wife will tell me how you need to load the dishwasher or something like that. The minute I start putting this, no, that's not how you need to do it. It's like, oh, try to relax. The dishes are going to get washed anyway. It's like, I think don't necessarily tell them how. Just what, why, and when is enough. It's also good to provide feedback when you've delegated stuff and people get it done, to provide the feedback on how they've done it, compliment them. And here's one other tip. when something actually goes wrong, it's your fault. But when they do a good job, the credit is all theirs. Keep that in mind. Now, there's also another thing about delegation. It's called the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum. It's around management style, around delegation itself. Now, when you start a new team, chances are people aren't skilled enough. And this tells you how to actually build up a team over a period of time and start delegating more and more across to them. So initially, you'll basically tell them what needs to be done, and then you sell the concept on why it needs to be done and things like that. And then towards the end, you give them more and more authority on how to get it done. Like in the end, you completely step away and you've delegated the entire thing for them to do. So the key thing about this is the more freedom that your manager actually gives to the subordinates, right? The more freedom that they give, the more authority they actually lose, which is actually a good thing. Right? You may actually say, hey, I'm losing my authority. Is it a bad thing? No, it's not. Now you can actually go away to the next position. You get the promotion and you move on, while someone within your team will get promoted as well. So it's a really good model. Talk about dealing with conflict. Conflict is something that happens between two people and they just can't agree on it. And that's just putting it mildly, right? I mean, you may all have disagreements, but this actually goes to another scale altogether. And conflict is really bad for an organization. And there are effectively just two outcomes from conflict. One is flight. You want to completely avoid the situation. People go on leave. They'll go to extremes. They will quit job. I had a situation where there was conflict between two people in my team, and I hadn't heard about it. I was away somewhere else, and somebody actually called and said, hey, there's a little bit of a conflict between these two people. By the end of the evening, even before I could actually call and talk to this person had quit. He had left the job. And I'm trying to talk this person out. I said, oh, come in, I'll have a chat with you. And this person went on sick leave, and he did everything to avoid coming into the office. He resigned, he didn't want to have anything about it. And the sad part is the other person also left after a while. So if this person had stayed, they would still be working over there. But people go to extremes to just avoid a situation when there's a conflict, and that's no good. The other one is fight. You get angry and you get emotional, and you have these angry outbursts at people and things like that. So either way, the verbal abuse, shouting, none of these positions are good, right? But sadly, these are the two positions that people take. So how do you actually get over conflict? The first thing, of course, is recognize is that the earlier the conflict is resolved, the better it is for everyone involved, for the organization, for the two people involved. So one way of resolving conflict, there's more than one way of resolving conflict, is a technique known as leading out of drama. And this is all based out of work by a person called Stephen Kaufman. And he devised this thing called the drama triangle. So in the drama triangle, people generally take one of three positions in the triangle. So you end up being the persecutor. You're the person who basically thinks, hey, I am okay, but you're not okay. So everything I say, I just don't understand why you're not getting this. Just try and see it from my point of view. You're not getting it. Just do the damn thing that I actually tell you. That's the position of a persecutor. Like, everyone here is a moron. They're not getting what I'm saying. I don't know why, right? I'm okay, you're not okay. The second person is that of the victim. The victim is the one who actually thinks, well, I am not okay. I know you're okay, and you seem to be a really smart guy. I'm not able to get anything done. Like, I'm such a mess over here. And that's not a good position either. And of course, there's this third person who's the rescuer, who will come in and rescue the victim and say, oh, you know what? I feel really sad for you. Let me do this. Let me fix this for you. And this person does, even without the victim asking for it. And they feel really good about jumping in, rescuing someone, and basically talking about other people. You know what? I fixed the situation. This person over here didn't know how to do it. Well, I came and helped this person out. Now, it turns out, right, that people can, depending on different times and situations, people can move in from being a victim into a persecutor or persecutor into a rescuer and all that. So people keep swapping roles. It's not that one person always plays the persecutor all the time. It does happen, but typically, even within a conflict, sometimes they will take different positions. So how do you get out of this? You look at it, right? So the persecutor instills fear. He attacks. Is very secretive, blames other people for his stuff. The rescuer is like, this leads to loss of initiative, resentment against other people. Again, it leads to low morale. And if you're the victim, you've got this loss of confidence, this isolation. You try and avoid people. It is a highly dysfunctional place to be. So the way to fix this is something known as the compassion triangle. And in the compassion triangle, so if you notice over there, you've got the P, V, and the R over there. And so you've actually changed that to this used to be, so the P for persistence, P for persecutor is effectively changed as persistence. And the R for rescuer in this has been changed to resourcefulness. And the V over here, victim, used to be vulnerable, and because vulnerable has negative connotations to it, they changed it to O for openness. These are the behaviors you need to exhibit to get out of a situation of conflict. So first thing, of course, is you need to recognize that you're playing one of these roles. And once you identify that you're doing it, so if you're the persecutor, you got to basically say, hey, hang on a second, I'm being this idiot, this moron, this jerk. I'm being a persecutor. I need to move away from it. I've got to start being a bit persistent. So you give people more time and you express and tell them, what needs to be done, and you be a bit more persistent. You tell them what needs to be done, and rather than not shouting at them. If you're the victim, you need to express yourself. You need to be more open with your feelings. You basically say, hey, I actually didn't understand anything that you were saying. Can you please explain that to me? And you express your feeling, and that's the way moving forward. Rather than jumping in and trying to be the rescuer at all times, you try to be resourceful. Effectively, you go and tell the person that, hey, I know you've got a problem. These are the ways in which you can actually fix it. Why don't you try and do it? So rather than jumping in and doing it for this person, you offer them the resources that needs to be done. And so in a situation of conflict, you could start from this openness position and negotiate out of it. You basically say, hey, you know what, I know you had, I'm feeling really disappointed that you say this work cannot be done by tomorrow. And then you go into this position, you notice this little arrow here, then you basically say, hey, can I provide you with an extra person to help you fix this thing? And then you go into the persistence position and say why you want to do it. And you say, because if we don't finish this on time, our customer is going to sue us. And what do you think about it? So you kind of like push that back onto that person. And this is a really good negotiation technique as well, and helps you get out of conflict. The last thing I want to talk about is leadership. Now, leadership has a lot of meaning to a lot of people. The first thing that people think about as soon as we mention leadership is about management. People in high positions where you're part of the senior leadership team, and these are the people that you look towards for things like inspiration. You look to see what kind of decisions that they take, and those kind of things. These are the people who take all the decisions within the company and so on. The other kind of leadership is something that you do when you're not even in the position of power. I mean, it's easy to actually influence and be a leader when you're the managing director of a company or the manager and things like that. But you could actually be a person in the mailroom and still exhibit leadership qualities. And the reason I picked up the mailroom as an example is because in the corporate world, a lot of people see the mailroom as the bottom of the food chain. It's a starting point for a lot of people. Even if you don't have a good education or something like that, you can actually start down in the mailroom. Even in the mailroom, so you basically say, this person has no authority whatsoever. What kind of leadership are they going to exhibit? But this person can actually go and say, hey, I see that the whole mailing system is broken. I can help with how the mail is sorted and how it can be delivered. And you can show some leadership and fix those kind of things. And that's the leadership that I want to talk about, more than the leadership that we talk about in the management. So how does it work for someone like software developers? Well, this is the thing you can basically influence change and show leadership without being a manager. That's the key takeaway, right? But it's just, how does leadership affect developers? And I want to talk about things like thought leadership. Before I started at Telstra Health, I used to work for a consulting company called Redify. And one of the things for me about Redify was the strong, the motto that they had, the ethos, the work ethos that they had. And it had like 3 words in it that rang a bell for me, rang a bell, which is around discover, master, and influence. Just 3 simple words. But these words effectively talks about how you could actually become a thought leader, how to become a leader in a certain area. So how do you go about doing it? The first thing is the stage of discovery itself, right? Sometimes you don't know what you want to do. And you go in and you look at, you read books, you look in the internet, you follow other people's blogs, you look at their Twitter accounts, you identify some of the key thought leaders that are there, and then you listen to what they've got to say. These are some really smart people, thought leaders in their areas, and you start listening to them. You also attend meetups and conferences. Now here's the thing where you kind of have a shallow approach. You try and learn a little bit of everything. But at some point in time, you probably figure out what's the niche for you, in which area that you want to focus on. And then you actually go deep into that area. This is the area where you talk about, you go in and start attending courses. You start attending workshops. Try and understand more on that specific subject. You look at other people's work. I mean, this is really useful for developers, right? More than anyone else. Because when you look at this, there are so many things on the, there are a lot of geeks out there who write, technical people, I should say, sorry, technical people who write a lot of technical content than any other subject. There's a lot of technical subject available than anything else in the internet. And there are lots of podcasts, so many things that you can actually follow. And when I say look at other people's work, you go into GitHub and there are so many open source projects. You go download that and you can even look at it and then say, hey, this is how good code needs to be written. So you can actually learn from the masters. So you learn, you get better at it. So the first stage is effectively follow thought leaders that are there. And the second stage is to become a thought leader itself. You start your own pet projects. You learn, get into it, deeper into it, and you effectively master the subject. Once you got the discover and the master, the third thing is to effectively influence people. And this is where you yourself become one of the thought leaders. You are recognized as a thought leader. Start writing a book. It doesn't have to be a book. You can start blogging about it. Start at a much smaller scale. You can speak about it. It doesn't have to be at a, you can start small by talking at your own, do brown bags in your company. Start at user groups, meetups. Then move on to even conferences and go start talking to a much larger audience. Start contributing to it, open source project. Start your own open source project. Get better at what you're doing. And you get recognized as a thought leader in that space. Now, just to summarize everything, apart from hard skills, which is effectively what people call, the technical skills and things like that, people call as hard skills. Soft skills are really necessary in the workplace. And one key thing that I want to point out, which I didn't do throughout the talk, is that these skills are just not relevant in the workplace, and they help you a lot at home as well, just in your personal life. Just knowing how to deal with conflict. It happens all the time in your personal life. That's really good. How you communicate with person, how do you speak, how do you pay attention and listen? All that is important, as important as it is in your work life, it's important in your personal life as well. The third point is that there is no one size fits all. I talk about a lot of tips and techniques and tools and all that kind of stuff, you need to figure out what works for you. Some people find that writing on a piece of paper doesn't work for them. They need to put it on their little iPhones or whatever it is. And there are apps and for everything that you want to do. Talking about the Pomodoro technique, there's an app for it. You go download the app and you can set your timer. You don't have to get the kitchen timer, set it up on your next to your workstation. You go over to a web page, I think it's called marinatimer.com. You can go there and set up a timer. It just shows, it shows the timer drop down and it'll start buzzing once your 25 minutes is up. So find what really works for you. And that's all I had. I just thought it'll be good to open it up for questions. Yes?
About the leadership, what you suggest there is great. It's a great idea to suggest a developer to go outside work and have their own pet project.
Yeah.
But do you see anything developers could do within the environment of the company that actually will develop their leadership as well?
Yeah. So the question is around, is there anything in the company that help you with your leadership? Now, like I said, there are two things in leadership, right? So most companies focus on leadership that leads towards management. So they'll say, hey, you know what, I want you to be a better manager, and so we're going to give you manager and leadership training. And those training focus on some of the other soft skills that I touched upon. Things like how do you manage time, how do you communicate. So those become the focus of those leadership trainings, right? So the other type of leadership that I talked about is the one that you need to take a bit of initiative. You see a problem, and rather than leave it out as someone else's problem, they need to fix it and they'll get to it. You take the initiative and then start addressing that. And companies generally don't say, hey, you know what, I want you to do this thing. It's up to you to take that initiative. You go into a mailroom, as the example that I gave you, someone isn't going to tell you, like, I wanted you to fix this. You take the initiative and start doing it yourself. And then other people will look at it and go like, and they'll really appreciate that. So some companies do help you with things like, we're talking about the leadership, in the technical part of master, discover, and influence. Just helping, the company helping you to come to a conference and be present is their way of actually helping you as well. So they do help out in those areas as well. But it's generally not seen as much. Any other question? Yes?
So you were talking about delegation. I'm curious about your take on kind of the skill of letting go. Right? Because when you delegate, you're lucky if somebody can do the job better than you.
Yeah.
That's a great situation. Oftentimes you have to allow some level of imperfection.
Yep.
And we usually resist doing that.
Yeah, I see, and that's where this whole, you look at this chart over here around and the Tannenbaum-Schmidt continuum. It's a lot of people, it starts over there, where you tell people what to do and how to do it, right? And you've got the complete authority. The manager has got that complete authority. And at this point in time, they don't have the skills. So we need to help in facilitating them develop those skills as well. So you don't want to set them up for failure. So don't give them something that they don't know how to do, and they're saying, hey, can you do it? And so over a period of time, you make sure that they have the necessary skills. It may not happen right away. So this could be like over a period of 2 to 3 years when the team is completely self-sufficient, and then you don't even have to be there, and they'll do everything themselves. So some of these things just don't happen overnight. It takes a period. Now, and the other thing is like this thing about trust that I actually said, and it's the same thing with you. You said, hey, how do I actually trust this person can do as good a job as as me? And I've been surprised a lot of times when you tell someone what you need what needs to be done, and they get it done rather than telling them how to get it done, because they'll come up with some new and innovative techniques. I can think of one example where I was in a team where we automated everything that needed to be done, and we used PowerShell for it. So there was there's one job we couldn't automate through PowerShell because it had a web interface, and that was the only thing. There was no API or anything. You had to go into the web, go in, search for this person, go click on this button, click on that button, set these flags, so on. And so when an intern joined the team, one of the guys who was really good at PowerShell thought it would be a really good idea to actually get the intern to do this hard grunt work of going in and clicking all these buttons and setting it up. He said, oh, he's going to be busy for a few days. But he said, oh, and he said, why? He said, like, hey, you know what? We automate everything, and I can't be bothered doing this myself. I can't be clicking all these buttons. And he gave it to this person, right? This person went in, and he used, he did some web automation thing where they go in and wrote the scripts and got this whole thing done. And at the end of the day, he comes around and said, I've got it done. And he goes like, what? How did you get it done? You're pleasantly surprised, right? And that's a good thing. So sometimes we need to kind of like let go of that control. It's sort of really hard to do and trust someone. Tell them what needs to be rather than how. But again, you got to be careful of the task that you're giving. Obviously there are certain things you just cannot give it to people. It's highly important things, and you don't want to stop them up. Like I said, if something goes wrong, it's totally your fault. So you need to be prepared to take that as well. Yeah, cool. Any other questions? All right. If there are no other questions, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks for coming, everyone.